Hello everybody, my name is Cezary Giluk. You can find all previous presentations at my Patreon channel. Give me a thumb up, subscribe, become a member, or buy me a cup of coffee, links below. A bit more about myself at the end of presentation. Let's go directly to the subject, today's topic, winning or defeat. I'm not one of those experts who predicts who will do what Trump will do regarding war in Ukraine, and how he will deal with Putin. Some of experts predict so many scenarios that whatever will happen, they can always say that they predicted it. There was an expert predicting that Kamala Harris will win elections in US, and most of the social media plus experts followed his point of view and were dead sure that Trump will lose. After Trump won, suddenly they disappeared. I want to evaluate what would happen if Trump would force peace treaty between Ukraine and Russia. If this would be a case, Ukraine and US and West would basically lose. Putin would learn again that whatever he does, he can get away with. Putin is unpredictable and will exert pressure points to achieve what he wants. There is hope that he will put so much pressure on Trump that Trump will finally give up the idea that he can negotiate peace between Ukraine and Putin. Very important aspect is the land, who owns what. Ukraine never should allow Russia to declare land they occupy as theirs if peace treaty would be signed. Russia already declared in their constitution that 4 oblasts are Russians, even if they do not occupy whole areas. By the same measure, they could declare in constitution that Europe or Washington DC belongs to Russia. Sounds like a bad joke, and it is what it is, a bad joke. Never underestimate Russian propaganda and the way they do things. They act from the position of bully, let others' imagination and minds to chew on the information, and wait for the response. Then they put a lot of bull, proving their point, and as always, they can threaten other side. If they do not agree, they will nuke them. If there would be a peace memorandum signed, for Putin it means nothing. Has everybody forgotten about Budapest memorandum? It did not take Putin long time to break it, and he will break this one after a while. What he needs is the time to get economy back on track and build up army. And then history will repeat itself again. One of the points represented by quite a few experts is that it should not be NATO protecting borders, but individual countries sending soldiers and equipment to supervise peace at the border. It would play perfectly well into Putin's hands, as he would not deal with NATO, but with individual countries. If he attacks or creates border skirmishes at the border, and he will, the country whose soldiers are attacked will have to deal with it, not NATO. And what? The country declares war on Russia or Putin? Won't happen. The simplest solution for the country would be to find excuse to pull army out. Another question is, for how many years countries would be prepared to keep forces in Ukraine, and who would pay for it? After a few years, forces would be pulled out based on one or another reason or excuse. After first country pulls soldiers out, others will follow saying, such and such country moved out, we are too stretched to protect Ukrainian borders, and for safety of our soldiers and our country we are moving out. And Ukraine were left in the worst position than it is now. Without border protection, door would be opened for another Russian aggression. This time Russian army would be a lot better prepared with armaments and modified tactics. They learned in Ukraine that meat grinder attacks do not really work and are very expensive in personnel and equipment. They would prepare themselves studying US and West way of how to conduct war. There were quite few wars played out in the last decades, and for Russian think tank there are a lot of materials to study. On the other hand, there is so huge corruption in Russian army and reporting that it may actually prevent it from changes. Dictatorial system is not promoting independence of army units in military operation, but creates very structural way of doing business with high control from the top down. Regardless of what will happen, in my personal opinion, any peace between Ukraine and Russia is not a good scenario and outcome. It would prove to Putin again that he can do what he is pleased, and US, NATO and West will let him get away with it. All parties proved it over and over again. The help given Ukraine was too little and too late. Limitations imposed on use of weapons tied up Ukraine's hands behind its back. Provocations with drones flying over and exploding inside of NATO countries were ignored, as NATO was too scared to respond. Same as shooting at Norwegian ship and shooting NATO country helicopter were left without any response. Again, NATO worked very hard to show that it is scared to do something, as it would get them involved in the conflict and NATO forces might be put on the line. NATO is strong quoting Article 5, but when it comes to action based on it, Article 5 is totally forgotten and disregarded. Coming back to the peace agreement, it is impossible scenario, as it will not stop conflict permanently, but temporarily. As the say is, you pay little now or a lot later. The only way, in my opinion, is to help Ukraine to win the war and then help with dictating peace agreement. Russian army is not so far from collapsing due to corruption, huge losses in manpower and armaments. Old equipment is being pulled out of storage and sent to the front lines, but eventually they will run out, and Russia has no manufacturing power to produce so much as is destroyed on daily basis. Bigger and bigger difficulties to be expected as time progresses. Only Ukraine needs to have time and proper armament support. If troops would decide to stop support for Ukraine, Europe must take over, especially if they would start manufacturing their own and purchasing armaments, let's say from South Korea, not from US. Trump would see income from selling weapons dropping down and quite fast change his tone, as Americans would be not so happy that big income from delivering weapons to Ukraine dries up. Personally, I do not see peace as valuable option. Russia sooner or later will break it, blaming West for it. Russian propaganda worked up to perfection of how to manipulate disinformation and blaming others on what they did. They will create border skirmishes and blame it on particular country. They would explain that they are forced by country to defend itself, and because this country attacked Russia army at the border, they must attack this country. And then Russia would find excuse to attack another country. Give me thumbs up, subscribe, become a member, or buy me a cup of coffee, links below. Now a bit about myself. My name is Cezary Giluk. I'm not military or political science specialist, but have a lot of common sense, watch a lot of social media and news about what is happening in Ukraine, and have a point of view which, in a lot of cases, is different from experts on social media. To share my look at what is happening in Ukraine, I have created my own channel, Common Sense and Ukraine. This was my presentation, Winning or Defeat. I hope that you liked it. Slava Ukraine!